Hello everyone and welcome back to Vlada's Place. One of my favorite things in the world is taking road trips across America with my kids. This time we are visiting Navajo land and Monument Valley, and what a beautiful place this was. Upon returning home, I did some research on Navajo food. So to finish up our travel through Navajo land, I have a perfect recipe. This particular dish happens to be something that I too grew up on as a child, and this is a recipe for fried bread. So I'm going to show you how to start the dough, and then we're going to take the dough outside and we're going to try to prepare this dish outdoors just to make it more authentic. So we're cooking for a family of 4. So I'm going to go with 4 cups of all-purpose flour, and in my case I'm feeding 2 boys, so I'm using 4 cups because we're gonna need a little bit more dough. Now 4 cups of flour set aside, and then we're gonna go with a cup of lukewarm water, a teaspoon of sugar, and about a teaspoon of yeast, maybe a teaspoon and a half. So I should have pre-measured this with precise measuring spoons, but you saw approximately how much yeast I put in there. Mix it and just allow yeast to activate before you add it to flour. Depending on the temperature, yeast should normally activate within the first 10 to 15 minutes. So now the yeast is activated, we're gonna make a dough. For the dough, you just need a little bit of salt, and I'm going with half a teaspoon of salt. You can do a little bit more. See, this is one of my problems, I can never just go exactly 1 teaspoon, or I always have to add a little bit more. And now we're just gonna bring this yeast in the middle, and then I'm gonna fetch a little bit more of warm water. Just to help with the measurements, I have additional 2 cups of lukewarm water. If you remember, we have a cup of warm water already here, and I have some more flour on the side. So basically we will see how much water or moisture we will need to add to this dough. So let's just start with about additional 3/4 of a cup actually. We're just going to start mixing, and I will tell you how much moisture we will need depending on the dough consistency. Let's add a little bit more. We want to have a nice and soft dough. Because soft dough will rise better, and when we fry the dough, it will be airy and more bubbly inside. So it's important that we don't end up with a thick and dense dough. So I'm making this measurement, which normally should be enough for a family of 4 and then some, but my hungry crew said that's not enough dough, so we are going to double the measurement. So I'm gonna add additional 4 cups of flour, and I'm gonna do everything double, so we're gonna have a nice big dough. So this is basically a good measurement for 4, but if you're feeding hungry teenagers, you might want to double. So I added a little extra flour and some yeast and water, and I want to show you what dough should look like. As I mentioned, we wanted to have a thin dough, but we also need to have it where it's manageable. This is at this point it's a little bit too sticky, so I'm just gonna use this time to incorporate the flour and water really good. And for that, if you have a mixer, that's great. KitchenAid is great. Otherwise, just use your fingers. As you move the dough, just kind of squeeze it and try to make a nice texture. Go for the good texture, okay? When you're done with that, a little extra flour on the wall of a dish. Okay. Scrape the dish because we don't want to waste any of this. And then continue to work the dough. Bring the ends. You see how I'm bringing ends to the middle? And once I bring the ends, I use my tips of my fingers to grab it, and then I use my knuckles to kind of bring it all in. One hand is moving a dish, and the other one is just working the dough. And when you add flour, add little at a time, because all we're trying to do here is to kind of shape the dough without adding too much flour and making it thick. So this is right now looking really good. The dough is nice and soft under my fingers. So I'm gonna work it a little bit more, and then we will let it rest. So in old days, yeast was not accessible to everybody. So people made a dough with the local bacteria, like a sourdough bread. And so this dough is a bit different, and this dough can also be fried. This is a sourdough. We won't be using it today. I'm just gonna bake bread out of that. But I just kind of want to point out that in old times, people did not always have the access to yeast, and instead they could just cure the dough with the local bacteria, like sourdough bacteria. This is going to make a great sourdough bread. And the beautiful thing about sourdough is that it's fragrance. It smells just heavenly. Our sourdough is going back to fridge because it's much quicker and easier to work with the yeast risen dough. All right, this dough is ready too. It's very smooth, and consistency is great. So the next step is just letting it rest. It's looking really, really good. So next step, I'm gonna let it rise. And today is a really warm day, which means the dough will activate probably in the next 15 to 20 minutes. And so that's just enough time for us to go in a vineyard and set up the cooking, outdoor cooking area. Instead of dragging our barbecue down to vineyard, we decided to use the fire pit. So we pulled out the rack out of the oven, put 4 cups on the side, and this will be our stove for tonight. With such a beautiful weather, I purposely wanted to cook these fry bread outside so the kids could enjoy the nature. This beautiful warm weather, it's doing a magic on our dough. Dough is almost ready for the next step. My son has a job to make sure that this little invention will work. So let's give it a shot. I hope this will work. Everyone is super hungry and they can't wait for the meal. And that's the way I like it. Because everybody's hungry and a bit impatient, we're just gonna start with the dough. So we're gonna need quite a bit of flour on the bottom because we don't want dough to stick. Then we're just gonna empty the dough. You see how nice and bubbly is inside, and that's what we need. Normally, the more time you invest in rising the dough, the better the fry bread will be. But again, we're kind of speeding through this process bit. Nothing beats cooking outdoors. Now that dough is done, we're gonna thin it and let it rise again. So while you do this, make sure that you have enough flour on the bottom so the dough does not stick, because dough will have to sit on the table for a little bit. So you don't want to have a sticky dough because it will be hard to remove it when it's time to fry it. All right, once you have the dough thin, just stretch the edges a little bit more, and the dough will rise. And once we cut it and before we fry it, we're gonna stretch it a little bit more. But basically, this is about the thickness you're aiming for all around the dough. So again, keep in mind, we are doing a double measurement here. So So my dough looks pretty big here, but if you follow the 4-cup flour recipe, you should have half of this dough, and it would be easier to work with. So we got it to the perfect thinness, and now we're just gonna let the dough rest and rise once again. All right, so you're gonna need a handsome portion of oil, so maybe about 1.5 inches in depth, and then we're gonna warm this up. All right, now we're gonna cut them, and using a pizza cutter is a very good idea. Now we're just going to have to wait probably another 15 to 20 minutes for the dough to rise once again. Even this waiting time has its charm, because this was the perfect time for kids to calm down, to really absorb the nature around them, and to relax. And most of all, this was a good time for them to reconnect and engage in a conversation with their cousin who was visiting with us. If you are visiting my channel for the first time, you might not be aware that I'm also a founder and a CEO of a charitable organization called Vlada Seeds of Life, whose mission is to reconnect American families and communities.
Hey, yo, Vladimir over there.
Okay, it looks like we are ready to put this little cooking adventure to a true test. We got the fire going, and now the key is to maintain the flame under the frying pan, because we are experiencing little evening breeze and it looks like we are losing some of the heat, but we will just have to figure out how to do this, and we'll somehow manage. All right, so let's give it a shot. I have never cooked fried bread on an open flame like this. Obviously this is going to be a little challenge because the flames are not remaining under the pot the whole time, which might not give us the perfect temperature, but it looks like it's working for now. So let's see how the first one goes. This is looking pretty good. I think we have a good fire. This is going to be okay. Okay, it should be nice and brown on the other side. It is golden, actually. Perfect. This is actually working out. I was concerned that we will not have enough flame, but we're managing, and this is the first one, and it's looking absolutely perfect. All right.
Why not?
So now we're gonna stretch it. You see, after they have sat around for a little bit and rised, I'm gonna stretch it. Ooh, this is really stretchy. Okay, and then fry it. With the right kind of fire, you only need about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes on each side. So this is the first one, and they are amazing. I mean, without anything. We got some Nutella, we got jam, honey, cinnamon, and all the good stuff. And this is gonna be tonight's dinner. So, Mattia, so good. Generations and generations of children were raised on similar foods like a fried bread. So Navajo or Serbia, and the recipe is almost exactly the same. And this is the kind of food that most children in the world will say yes to. Fried bread is delicious, both served savory and sweet. We usually serve it with the raw honey, with a lot of walnuts, homemade jams, but as tonight you'll see it, we are serving it with Nutella. Also, they're phenomenal served with cold cuts and various cheeses. However you do it, this is truly a great beginning to many different dishes and variations. So go ahead and make it, enjoy it, and I trust you will like it. And by the way, it was so good, even bunnies could not resist the smell. A delicious treat like this is also great served with the quality family time. or simply relaxing among your friends and your family and maybe your neighbors, and just taking a moment to make memories and to enjoy beautiful summer afternoons. This is definitely the most delicious way to end your travels, and that is to embrace it with the food and culture of the places that you visited. As I said in the beginning of this video, this happens to be something that my mom used to make, and I was very surprised to find out that this was a staple food for Navajo Nation for many decades. So delicious by all means, and I would definitely encourage you to try to do this with your family and your kids. But more than that, I would encourage you to take a trip with your children and go and explore this wonderful country of ours. Taking road trips is fun and it's memorable in so many ways. Thank you all for watching. I look forward to spending more time with you in our next episode. And until then, please take good care of yourself and those around you. Thank you so much for watching and for spending time with us. I hope you like this video, and I hope you'll send us your likes and you will subscribe. Just this year, we drove from San Diego to New York, and along the way, we picked up quite a few more recipes which we can't wait to share with you. So stay tuned.